We are chairing today's session. I'm Alexander Batteiger, so I'm in a line with my two colleagues. I work as well for GSZ in a global advisory project based in headquarters, mostly working on circularity of electronics and batteries.
I'm Harald Sverdrup. I'm from the Inland Norway University. I'm a professor of system dynamics, and I build integrated assessment models on global scale. I'm pleased to be here and help chairing this. I think we start now. Then in slot number 1, we have Sophia Schüller, which will speak about regional phosphorus recycling. Please take the chair or floor.
Is this on? Yes. Okay, so my presentation is on phosphorus recycling, as I have said already. So I want to start with what is phosphorus recycling. When preparing this presentation, I was not quite sure what your background knowledge was. So I will start at the beginning and try to keep it short. And if it's boring, just bear with me a minute. I don't have that many minutes, so it will be short. So when I asked an image generating artificial intelligence what phosphorus recycling was, those were the pictures that were put out. They look quite dystopian, to be honest. There were also others that gave me some kind of Mad Max vibe. I don't know whether you have seen that movie, but there was a lot of desert. It was all not so good looking. And this is really in line with what we've just heard about mining. But what is actually the difference is that this is recycling. So there are actually no mines, and this is an improvement. But this does show already what we kind of need to tackle with, like the perception of the public that sometimes comes when they hear recycling, that this is something dirty, something unattractive, and something bad. So I probably don't need to tell all of you about raw critical materials of the European Commission. Phosphorus is one of them. And phosphorus is actually one of the non-substitutable components of all living life. Everybody needs it. We need it as humans to grow bones, to be strong. Plants need it to grow, and it is mostly used as fertilizer. So the currently known reserves will last approximately 300 years. And what is very important is that no country in the European Union has their own deposits, and very few countries have. There was a large deposit found in Norway, for example, but it is a question of whether that is reasonably and economically mineable. So we do have a problem there because it is not sustainable, and every country depends largely on imports from other countries, such as Morocco, the US, Russia, etc. So very shortly about the phosphorus recycle. On the left, you see the mines. So phosphorus is being mined, for example, in Morocco, and then it is processed and used as a fertilizer, put into the ground. There's also another path of usage, which is industrial. For example, it's used in phosphorus acid, which is then used in cleaning products, but also in Coke, I mean Coca-Cola. And right, it is used as fertilizers. And of course, we use it and take it in through our food consumption. And we also give it away through the sewage system and through using the toilet, at which point, this is the point I usually like to thank all of you for your contribution, which is not a good party trick, by the way. But still, we give it away through the toilet, and then it is through the sewage system, it gets into the wastewater recycling plants, and there it can be recycled. There do exist various technologies to do the recycling, but some of them have not been really implemented large scale. So this is a lot of laboratory scale, and actually it's not even necessary and mandatory to recycle that. Germany is one of the few countries in the European Union that will have a mandatory recycling quota from 2029 on, and being in Switzerland, of course, Switzerland also does that, and the other one is Austria, but that's it. No other country does that, and as I have pointed out, we will have a huge problem, the latest in 300 years, but probably a bit before that, because we're so dependent on the imports. And it can be, as I said, recycled from the technology, from the wastewater treatment plant, and this, for example, would make it possible to recycle up to 35% in Germany of the needed phosphorus. So this is where I would come in and would like to present the BMBF funding measure REFOR. BMBF stands for the German Ministry of Education and Research, and REFOR stands for the title, which is Regional Phosphorus Recycling. So there are three main aims and goals in this funding measure. The first one is, for example, is the regional aspect. So the phosphorus recycling is being done in a wastewater treatment plant, which comes with a problem, which is the transport waste, which is not sustainable really. So we want to find out how it is possible to use them in a regional way and to recycle it and then use it where it is being recycled. So not to transport it through countries or even through cities. The second goal is to improve large-scale implementations. There is currently, to my knowledge, one big wastewater treatment plant in Germany that is doing that already large scale, but that's it. So this is not so good because we depend on it. So we want to make it possible for enterprises, for municipalities, etc., to do the large-scale implementation. And they use various technologies for P recovery from the sewage, either from the sludge or from the ashes. And the third goal is, of course, just an increased production and use of secondary phosphorus to reduce the dependency that I've just mentioned. So this in the down is the time frame. We started in 2020, basically, with the project. Or the projects, and will last until 2025, although due to several problems, for example, the pandemic, etc., and delivery problems, we will probably be a bit longer. In total, there are 7 joint projects, and there's a funding volume of 28 million euros. So the 7 projects are located throughout the whole of Germany. The projects were being selected due to regional differences. For example, some are being in the middle of Germany where there's very much agriculture. So the wastewater is very different. And also the use for fertilizer is much increased compared to, for example, North Rhine-Westphalia, which is in the left, where there's a much higher and denser population. So the wastewater is once again very different. Okay, wow, I'm slow. Right, so I can skip this. And to point out what I'm doing, I'm from the scientific accompanying project Transfor. We organize exchange on cross-cutting topics, for example, products and markets, sustainability assessment, and legal aspects. And those are issues that I think is concerning everyone who's being busy with some kind of recycling and also use of secondary materials. Because sometimes the markets are just not there. There is a need for it, we all know it, but still, for example, fertilizer companies may not want to buy this because they assume that the population does not want it because it is being perceived as dirty because it comes from wastewater. So this is a huge problem, and it does need, for example, some kind of marketing campaign or other activities to tackle that belief, which is not necessarily even there in the population, but in the companies that need to buy this and sell this. So this is one of the things that we need to identify, the market entry barriers and also other factors that will influence the supply and demand in the future. For example, people changing their diet to being more vegetarian, more vegan, etc. Then the sustainability assessment, we also carry out a life cycle assessment and ensure that all the life cycle assessments of the different paths of the phosphorus recycle are being comparable. There's also an economic feasibility study to see whether that is the recycling is actually feasible, because at the moment it really costs a bit more than it brings in. But this will change in the future when there is just no more phosphate deposits. And the last aspect is the legal aspects, which is the definition of end of waste properties. I could tell probably half an hour about that because it's quite funny actually if it weren't so serious. Because sometimes you cannot really use that because the wastewater or the wastewater sludge is being defined as waste, and then you cannot use or produce fertilizer from that. So this is also something where you basically need to do, I don't know, to study law and to do a lot of talks and talk with workshops, talk with stakeholders, etc., to tackle that. And then last is the problem of just to give an example of organizational models and legal forms, because wastewater treatment is in Germany and in most of the EU the job of municipalities, which are public forms, and they cannot really make that much profit. So to sell that, they need to fund to start businesses, and this combines some problems. So very quickly, the summary. Phosphorus is a critical raw material, and we do need to tackle this issue. The closing of material cycle is a basis for the development towards a circular economy. There's a large potential in a municipal sewage sludge to substitute a considerable part of the imports, and also basically there are very much other valuable components in the sewage, so we should not dismiss that just because it is being perceived as dirty. And our project and the whole funding measure will publicate guidelines and best practice examples for all countries, hopefully, and for different kind of regional conditions. And right, the implementation of the demonstration plants is still in progress, so I cannot really give that many results at the moment, but you can always visit our website, and I think that's it.
Thank you.
You can stay here. So thank you, Sophia, for your nice presentation. First and foremost, there is some time left for questions from the audience. So if anyone either online or in the room has a question, I would now give the floor to you. I see a question in the first line. Please use the microphone.
Sorry. Have one or two or more of the projects have taken into account that the toilet system would be better if it's a separation system, or was that ignored?
That was kind of ignored, but it is an interesting question in general. The thing is that we are mainly, or the projects are mainly busy with the actual implementation of the recycling technologies and all the organizational and legal matters that come with that. So they do not take into account anything that comes before the wastewater treatment plant, but they do take what is there. But it is a very interesting question, and I will take that into consideration.
Yes, a question. I mean, the most important problem to recycling phosphor is the price, because recycling phosphor is much more expensive than the raw phosphate. And I mean, don't you think that if the political people are very agree that there's a big problem, that we should put perhaps a tax on the primary phosphor to make that the recycling phosphor more interesting? Because so long the price difference is so big, I didn't think the farmer will buy a recycling phosphor.
That is a very big problem, something that we try to tackle within one of the cross-cutting topics by discussion. I am a scientist, so I can only give my, I can try to be neutral. I have not really the results to say whether that would be good. In my personal opinion, definitely, that is the way to move on, or to build pressure from bottom up, basically, because people want this and then the price increases. But I do think, as we have also heard in the keynote, it would be better that way, yeah.
One more question is good. Please use the microphone for the online audience.
Which kind of communities do you mean? Like the municipalities, basically, or the populations?
The population, for example, sector-wise communities, for example, population who are like basic consumers, and also agriculture, like agronomists or farmers, that sort of thing.
Since this is a very broad funding measure with a lot of joint projects, I think that the communities are affected differently, and this is a very, very extensive question to answer, because for example, for the population, this funding measure will not have a direct impact, in my opinion, or it will only come later when there is being a large-scale implementation, be it through additional fees for the wastewater treatment process for the recycling, because it will be more expensive. But also because they can buy products and essentially food that is being fertilized with secondary materials. So this, for example, is something that will affect them, but only later when we have established the implementation. So mainly the affected stakeholders, let's say, are more like enterprises at the moment, and also the municipalities, to help them find the resources which recycling technology would be best to implement for their wastewater treatment plant.
Implementing circular economy in the regions. What was the Delphi study? We will do like this. 2 minutes left, 1 minute left, no minutes left.
Okay. Is it on? Yeah. So in the following couple of minutes, I will be presenting the results of
No, the microphone isn't working.
It's this microphone.
And now? Oh, great. And yes, so in the next couple of minutes, I will be presenting the findings of our empirical study, the Policy Delphi study, which is basically focusing on the formulation and implementation of circular economy policies within European regions. So basically, the study objective overall is to uncover the relationship, the links between the smart specialization strategies, the S3 strategies, a very pivotal regional development policies within the EU, and the circular economy policies at the regional level. In order to address this study and this objective, we have developed 3 main research questions. The first one is, again, trying to uncover the link between S3 and the regional C policies. The second research question was basically trying to uncover the existing regional efforts in terms of tracking the transition towards circular economy in European regions, in European NUTS2 regions. And the third research question is to try to uncover and identify institutional pressures coming from the normative side, coercive side, and mimetic pressures, which are influencing and accelerating the adoption of circular economy policies at the regional level. For this purpose, we have developed a Policy Delphi study with 4 phases. In the first phase, it was just a nomination, selection, contacting of experts. And the target group, I must underline here that it was regional policy experts, analysts working in regional administrations within the European region, within European regions, working on areas like smart specialization, circular economy, green transition, and so on. In the second phase, we have distributed a really brief online survey just to uncover the main, let's say, themes that we would like to further discuss. This survey was distributed and we managed to get 42 participants coming from 32 different regions. Phase 3 was the most important one, the crucial one, where we have performed 19 online semi-structured individual interviews with 19 different participants, not only coming from regional governments, but also with relevant academics, but also higher level policymakers coming from the Committee of Regions, the CCRI initiative, the JRC Seville. So we also try to include the higher level picture in this discussion. The transcript therefore were analyzed with template analysis using a mixed approach. And in the last stage, we have distributed and summarized these findings into a policy brief type of format, where we have tried to summarize and synthesize all the findings and send them out for validation. These findings were included in 7 main groups in terms of policy implications. And the main purpose of this stage was basically to validate the findings, to validate and also to enrich them and see if maybe we have missed something. I will go just in this slide in detail. So this is basically the outcome of the study. The really detailed version of the conceptual framework we have developed, where we tried to literally put all details and findings that emerged from the study. And we have tried to summarize them into 7 main building blocks or groups, as we have called them in the conceptual framework. So the pointer, yeah. In the yellow box, we have the regional narrative in the circular economy transition, which is the starting point, obviously, because every region will transition in its own regional differentiated manner based on its own regional factors. In the left-hand side, in the green box, we have the institutional pressures, where we have tried to identify several items, several pressures within each group, from the legislative, normative, and mimetic pressures, trying to identify the most dominant one and how we can leverage on those ones. Within these normative pressures, you can see also the regional circular economy hubs or networks, for which I will also speak in a while. And they're also emerging as a quite important normative pressure in the whole story. In the middle is the formulation and implementation of circular economy policies, but you also see there the EU Green Deal, because they're obviously interconnected in the CE policies. It's one of the main building blocks of the EU Green Deal. Up in the pink box, we have the links, the mutual relationship between S3 and circular economy nexus. And then we have the partnership for regional innovation, which is still in process, acting as a potential risk mitigation mechanism for this whole relationship. At the end, in the red box, we have the regional performance and the efforts in terms of tracking the performance of regions into their transitioning towards a more circular future. These are basically the main research findings emerging from the conceptual framework. I tried to highlight the most important ones. So obviously there needs to be a careful consideration of the regional structural aspects, which means on one hand, we need to entail a place-based approach, which is anchored on regional strengths. But on the other hand, we also have to take into consideration the regional challenges and opportunities that each region is facing. It was noted a tendency for organizational transformation of the surveyed regional administrations was noted, where most of the regional administrations seem to be shifting the focus towards challenges and transitioning themes. Of course, the institutional structures, capabilities, leadership skills available at the regional level was something of vital importance for this transition. In terms of institutional pressures, two-way mechanism or so-called balanced approach emerged. So on one hand, we have the international and new legislation coming from the legislative pressure groups, which emerged as the most dominant one, suggesting a top-down approach. And on the other hand, equally important, we have the regional stakeholders or the regional ecosystem, the quadruple helix model, and their actions, initiatives representing a bottom-up approach coming from the normative side of pressures. What is important is that there is a need to shift the relative importance of the normative and mimetic pressures in the future. And here the big question is what kind of changes might help to shift that. Right. In terms of the formulation and implementation of CE policies at the regional level, several risks emerge, like the risks of the Matthew effect, the fact that the most advanced regions are at a better starting position and a better starting position to catch up with this transition as compared to the lagging behind regions. And another quite important risk that is emerging is the fact that maybe the EU Green Deal and the circular economy policies, as they're structured now, and tied instruments and funds to them might be acting as a potential accelerator of the divide, therefore creating a two-speed Europe and widening the existing gap. In terms of the regional hubs, not much has been recorded into the literature so far, but they do exist in practice, like the Holland Circular Hotspot, and they seem to be playing quite a big role in this transition, steered by a professional figure called as a transition broker. S3 and Circular Economy Nexus, a mutual influence and interaction has been uncovered by these two policies. And a less deterministic relationship appears to exist between them, where several risks of negative influence has been uncovered. And the main reasons for the regional lock-ins is basically inherited in the heuristic of the S3. Because S3, it's a really place-based policies where prioritization in regions is done in areas of strengths, which is often was defined in really unsustainable activities. And the most prominent example of this one is basically regions with the NRBIs, the natural resource-based industries. The PRI already mentioned, it's a framework that is providing a more receptible opportunity for transformation. And in terms of tracking regional performance, not much has been done and a major regional data availability issues has been noted. Thank you.
Well, one general question, could you get as well the PowerPoint afterwards, because there was quite a lot of information, and sometimes it's good to read it further. I've got one question. I think you underlined that we need to measure much more. We need more data, and I think nowadays with all the good things that we can have with artificial intelligence, should be able as well to store data, the data that we need in a blockchain also. What do you think could be next steps to get this? And probably would be best would be to have that on a European level so that we can compare it.
Indeed, I think the measurement was one of the most important issues that also emerged in the study. What I have to say that a lot of regional data is missing, and there is also not conceptually devised frameworks for measuring and monitoring of activities. And while I was having the discussions with different participants, sometimes I was asking about measurement, meaning how circular is your region? And the answer that I was getting was money invested, project dealing with circular economy. So I think there is, first of all, there needs to be a clear definition of what we're speaking about. So we can start working in terms of that. And indeed, what you mentioned, I think the main solution for this whole issue was basically to leverage on the twin transition, trying to put the digital and the green transition moving in the same direction and try to leverage on digitalization and the available technology, because technology is there, and try to, I mean, we use ChatGPT and for different kind of purposes, and we also have a really great opportunity to use it in something more valuable. Thank you.
There is another question from the audience?
Yes, hello. I have a question about the longevity of the research you did, or the activities in the regions. Could you comment on that? Because my assumption is that for instance, the CE hubs, initially they got some support, public support for it. So how do you see that when this support, also the smart regions? So how do you see, were these questions included in your study? Like, how do they see, like, it's in the time frame 10 years from now? Will they be like on their own?
The question was related to the circular economy hubs, right, and to the networks.
Or well, generally the transition. Do you see that could take place without public support?
No, I'm presenting just a really the last part of the whole research. We have been doing another research that's dealing exactly on the stakeholders, and that needs to get on board. And there was also a paper that came out of that where we are basically promoting a so-called a living constellation of stakeholders that needs to be on board in order for this transition to work. And we don't speak about a constant fixed system of, I don't know, having actors from different sectors, or public sectors or academia, but we're speaking about an evolving system which needs to take into consideration and to be adjusted based on the developments. And we speak about obviously involvement of all quadruple helix actors, sorry.
In case there's no question from the audience, I would have one as well. Based on the, let's say, the interviews you've conducted and the research you did, in very practical terms, which regions would you recommend somebody to look at if you actually want to learn, let's say, best cases on how to approach or tackle the topic?
Yeah, I mean, there was obviously, I did not try to do some sort of archetypes or maybe typology of regions, but the most advanced ones were definitely Catalonia, the Spanish region. They're very much advanced in this whole situation. Dutch region, the Brussels capital region, Holland, Central Denmark region, even though they're a country, a member state that does not have legislative power on the subnational scale, they were quite advanced in by using informal ways of governance, if I can say so, in terms to process with the transition.
Thank you. And I would say we continue in the program now. And a big round of applause for you. And we will have the next presenter. Stefan will work on fine grades of circularity, and you can have that and take a microphone.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Dear Alexander, dear Harald, it's a pleasure to have the opportunity to speak here, but it's a challenge as well because I have to present 2 projects in 8 minutes, which is quite heavy. So the first just terminated half a year ago. That's called A Fine Future. And the second one is called Finest, dealing with even more finer particle, if you want to say so. The motivation for doing our research is basically that we need large amounts of base metals and critical raw materials for decarbonization, for achieving climate neutrality. Though I feel a bit bad because of the first presentation today, so it's a bit, but still I think we need resources, but we need to have them in a sustainable manner. Yeah, we have to do this to achieve it, to secure it at manageable costs, of course, and the carbon footprint shouldn't be too bad. And that's one point of the motivation, but the second one is that the natural ore deposits are kind of exhaustive, of course, yeah, and the composition of the ores gets more and more complex. So it's even very, very difficult with the conventional mineral processing to get the valuables out of them. And therefore we have the flotation technology, but still 30% of the valuables are lost. And they come to flotation ponds like Brumadinho in Minas Gerais in Brazil. And I think you all could remember the break of that dam and the disaster that caused and the death of many, many people. And for that, we try to improve the so-called elephant curve. So that means that the fines are not really recovered. And by pushing the tail up, we try to have less losses and more valuables. So we gathered a consortium of 16 partners from Europe, which are experts in flotation technology. And the idea was to improve the flotation technology, as well as to understand the fundamentals more better, because it's a very, very difficult process in the interfaces between bubbles, particles, and froth that comes into existence. And it was focused on 3 different ores: magnesite, manganese, and copper ores. And the approach was to have these complex ores, like chalcopyrite, and improve the mineral processing to have more ore concentrate and more copper in the end. And we started from lab experiments, from lab scale, improved up to the pilot scale with 5 cubic meter per hours of masses running through, and really managed to end up in a, let's call it, semi-industrial scale. So we had our flotation cell established at the KGMH's premises at a mining site, and did the test, and they were successful, like the diagrams on the right are showing. So we managed to lift the elephant's tail a bit. So that was the project on Fine Future. Now we started the Finest project, let's say 1 year ago, but the PhD students arriving since half a year or so. And we have a lot of fine residues which are not recovered at all. Like we saw this flotation pond already, that's kind of the same. It's in Poland again. So we have residues coming up, fine residues coming up in different parts of the value chain. That's in mining or mineral processing already, but also, of course, when the products are made in the manufacturing process, then we have fine dust, for example. And finally, when the products become end of life, there's also a lot of fine-grained material which is not recovered. So, and we will try to find sustainable solutions for that, recovering the containing valuables, as well as if they are not being utilized anymore, we will produce inert residues. And this will be done by something which is forbidden from the law, as she's not here anymore. We try to mix waste a bit. And by doing this, after cleaning and separation, we try to produce different types of valuables. First stream will be biomass and plastic. That's the organic stream. As well, we try to produce mineral products for construction purposes, for example. And we try to produce metals again, which is the easiest way, so to say, kind of. And also, all for this, for doing that, these material streams are re-entering the circular economy again. And if that's not possible, then we care for inert disposal of the remains. We have structured this project. This is funded by the Helmholtz Association in Germany. It's quite a big one. It's over 5 years. And the consortium consists of 4 Helmholtz centers and 2 universities. The scientific part is structured into 3 different sub-projects, each dealing with material streams. Like the first is microplastics. They aim at a bio-based recycling of microplastic residues. They try to use biotechnology in a way that the waste becomes the part of or usable as an input for the new products again. So they will be made into monomers or oligomers again. It's also possible that this biomass is used for microbial fermentation. And the rest, again, is safely disposed. The second sub-project is called mineral additives. And the waste product they use is the so-called ATICs. That's expandable thermal insulation material. And they are using chemical recycling. That means pyrolysis for the plastic part of the end-of-life product. And the mineral part will be used as recycling cement. The third sub-project is dealing with the metals, and through blending of complex residues, we are trying to recover the metal contained and try to, again, store the rest safely. The materials we will use there is shredder fines from automotive scrap, for example, fine dust and silicate powder. So as the project has just started, we cannot say anything about results, but we think we have an impact on education, on decision makers, on industry, and on ecology. And so we educate young researchers. They will become doctors with an interdisciplinary expertise in resource management. We hope they know about life cycle thinking and industrial ecology. The impact on industry will be to reduce waste, of course, and valorize more residues, and also very important, the knowledge transfer from these young researchers. Impact on decision makers will be to talk to them and adapt the regulations. Right now, forbidding to mix waste, for example. And the impact on ecology is obvious as well. So we have more resources recovered, materials will be kept in the loop, and amounts that are disposed are less, as well as the environmental risk is minimized. And we are sure that the circular will be circular. Thanks a lot.
So did I get it right? The law interdicts that you mix waste.
That's basically true, yeah.
Okay.
Only for research purposes.
All right. Is it a national law? Is it a European law?
At least it's a national law, but could also be the case for whole Europe.
Okay. So what, from your point as a scientific, needed to change that? I mean, you explore as well what kind of waste it makes sense, ecologic, probably as well economic waste. What is needed to support the lawmaker to move a step further?
Ooh, good question. I think the discussion is already going on what is waste really, yeah, because this problem is true for many, many recyclers, I think. And it's a tricky question, of course, because sometimes you don't want to mix waste really because of it could, yeah, certain explosions may happen. Yeah? I don't know exactly. We have to talk to them. So that's
I
we
think
have to give certain advices at least, yeah, and say that in certain sense, let's have a try first with low amounts, of course, and if there's nothing happening badly, we could proceed maybe.
So it's a little bit tricky question, not to open the box of Pandora.
Mhm.
Okay, I've got another question concerning what do you think the outcome of your project, the, let's say, kind of raw material, will you have a kind of competitive price if you're going to sell it, if you do it large scale?
I'm a bit skeptic about that because new material doesn't show the real price. That's the problem, I think. And in all my projects I managed, it was always the same. Yeah? It's always the economics that yeah, leads to a failure in the end. Yeah, or not a failure, but yeah, not to make it as an implemented technology really.
So probably what we need is what the colleague said. We need a kind of price tag for resources.
That's it. Yeah.
Further questions?
I was curious, do you have any percentages how much of the what part of sort of the recycling quota you are addressing with going into fine? Because that's the whole discussion about wear and tear is a very interesting and important one in circular economy.
We don't have right now. We have just started, and we will investigate in that, of course. But with wear and tear, it's quite an easy one if you know about your product really, or about the waste product as well. That's quite easy. It's more difficult with other wastes of waste fines. But of course, yeah, we should investigate in that, and it's let's say between 10 and 20%, I would assess.
No further question? We propose that we, sorry.
Just a comment. I'm from Antigua and Barbuda, and as I was listening to your presentation, we have one small operation on Antigua, the utility company that has all sorts of grades and sizes of wires. They bring all their leftovers to this point, and we were able to get a granulator for this small operation. So we have something that strips the wire, the plastics covering goes to make shreds, and the other parts produce the copper, and that is shipped out. But it's good that certain operations on the island realize the need not to just dump their waste and it goes to the landfill. So this small operation now is taking a lot of the waste streams, metals, but the waste pickers benefit because when they bring it, they get some income. Whatever they bring is weighed and they get some income. So we don't have a lot of research capabilities, and so I'm just telling you what we do in a small island. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot for this great example. Yeah, it's implementation. Yeah, that's what we are looking for. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Further questions? We propose that we continue with the talks now and do the panel at the very end, not risking to run any of the talks short. And then we'll do the panel in the time we've left. Would that be okay to you? Because then we go to the next talk, which is Sabine Oberhuber. please.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me here. Take the right slide. I'll be talking about material as a service as a new solution for the circular economy, or sometimes the next frontier. And we've developed that concept for quite some time, since 2006 we've been publishing about it. And actually product service systems such as the life as a service model have been around for quite some time. They've actually been at the heart of the circular economy discussions since I am involved since 2010, I would say, as a way to advance the circular economy through new business models. And the problem we saw is that actually they failed to address two very fundamental issues. One is ensuring that material and product circular across the entire value chain. Very often it's only the last two parts which you address by a product as a service model, because the producer himself is incentivized to make a circular product and he's getting it back, but then there is no way to get it back into the value. So there's no mechanism to feed the product back into the material back into the value chain. And what we very often see is that there's a lack of upstream incentives to make products and materials really, really circular. So we have to start at the beginning of the value chain if we want to realize real circularity. And the second is the just transition to a circular economy, which is also very important. So material as a service, we think, could be a means to address both issues, because you're sort of enforcing circularity through contractual obligations when you get it from the mining company up to the end user. And if you're selling not longer the ownership, but the right to use down the value chain, together with a contractual obligation to return the material at a certain point in time, then circularity is ensured. And by renting the material and not selling it any longer, you actually create a financial stream back to the country or the place where the material has come from, which will enable mining companies, mineral extracting companies, to benefit for much longer from the value which has been created with their material. So actually we see a lot of benefits from implementing this model. A, for society as large as it's enforcing circularity. B, for mineral extracting countries, because they can in a much more just way participate in global value creation. For mineral importing countries, it's addressing the risk of price volatility and resource scarcity in the long term. And for mining companies, it's also potential to extend their current business models for much longer than the current mining activities, because they're building a stock of materials which will last much longer than the current mines. This research in this area has just started, actually. We published the model I just showed you in 2016, presented it earlier, and we developed in 2013. First research appeared in 2019 by Walter Stahel, but also the Cambridge University, Andrew Hagan, and the Imperial College have published a couple of papers, but it's still a very, very young domain. And also the whole question about the just transition is also starting right now. The awareness that this is a very, very important topic which we have to address, because actually, and that is research from Chatham House, what we see is there's a circular divide coming, which is being enforced through the sort of global feedback loops of the global economy, is that through the existing divides, such as the finance divide, the digital divide, which means that developing countries don't have access to all those mechanisms which are actually important for the transition to a circular economy. They are the enablers, digitalization, finance, etc. And what will happen is that we accumulate wealth in the northern region rather than distributing it fairly across the global economy. So that's why we urgently need to marry these two discussions. And what I can highly recommend is research paper by Chatham House, which is addressing this danger which we are actually having created with the current circular economy and leaving out this very important discussion, but also the opportunities which are in there by collaborating and setting up mechanisms to work together. So what we see is that the material as a service needs a lot of research in many different areas in order to come off the ground. So it's a question about how do we do the governance for these financial streams which are being created. How do we make sure that material is being traced across global value chains? How could we install the government policies and incentives which make mass models the next reality? And I just need to find my last notes. And most importantly, I think we have to develop completely different attitudes towards material and the societal acceptance of waste. So we have to adopt the mentality of material stewardship actually at all societal areas and levels. So we have, as we often say, to have the mentality of treating each material as a precious Swiss watch. Which says that actually it doesn't belong to us, but to the next generation. And I think if we gather the research around that, then this will be a feasible concept. Thank you very much.
Progressing faster than expected.
Yeah, you beat the time. Very good. Questions?
Thanks. Quite interesting to hear. So product as a service, like when you talk about the regional divide, the north-south, how do you, because that's one of the challenging questions as well, because globally the companies would accept to something like that. But then when we see the transition in developing economies, this is still, it requires a push to kind of enable that ecosystem that the global manufacturers comply to the. So how would you address that challenge, especially when you refer to the just transition or that regional divide? So yeah.
Yeah, I think it's an excellent question. We are at the moment setting up really a multi team of different research direction, from economists and lawyers, etc., and from the north and the south, in order to address these issues on several levels. So we want to make create a blueprint to find out what the contractual agreements would need to be, but also how would you do the governance and for the funds which would come in through such a system. And also you would need to make sure that we can address where and localize material actually where it is going, so that you really make transparent where these stocks are. So does that answer your question?
Let's see. We have one at the back and then
interesting concept, and with the product passport regulations, this could be in some applications feasible. Have you been looking at the where this could start to take off? And I was thinking about, for instance, the life cycle of a product. I mean, if you have putting in a steel construction in a construction, which will be there for 40 years. I mean, obviously, it's different from having a mobile phone that will be at its worst 6 months in use, and before it goes back. So, where do you see yourself that this could take off?
Yes, it's a very, very relevant question. We are looking at that at the moment with the African Circular Economy Network, one of our development partners. And exactly, this is where we need to look. We need products which are have not such a short lifetime as a mobile phone, also because the quantities you are putting in such a phone and the mobility of those devices is so high that it's really difficult for a pilot project. Yet the construction industry, as you said, has very long life cycles, so it's maybe difficult to make proof of concept there. So we're looking at mid-range products. So windmills, for example, would be a possible potential application. They're not as long-lived as a normal construction, a house. But it is one of our research questions, actually, where would that be feasible as a blueprint in the first place?
Thank you. I had another question here.
Well, thank you for your very interesting presentation. I just have a question concerning clarifying. You mentioned the real circularity. What do you understand under real circularity?
That's an excellent question. Actually, what we see is that at the moment, circularity or product service concepts very often are sort of being used as a term for presenting someone is circular, but actually it's only a financial leasing construction. It has nothing to do with material circularity. And what we see is that we need to make sure that in every step of the value chain, circularity is embedded, because only when you start from the front of the value chain, you can make sure that actually at every stage you produce something which then can be recovered and reversed at its end of life. So that's how I would describe circularity.
Well, thank you. That's one way of seeing it, and there are different ways of seeing that as well. In terms of material, we heard before the other presentations, a whole different, I guess, definition about circularity there.
I think in the research there's 130 definitions. So
that's right.
Yes, thank you very much for this idea. Material as a service, fantastic. I think that goes a little bit as well in the direction of one of the presentations we had earlier today about sufficiency. Where the question was, wait, well, do we need our own car if we replace the thermal motor with an electric vehicle? Well, there's no big change. On the other side, we do not need a car, we need transport. So I think I don't need to own something if we have a different approach that could be pretty much different. On the other side, if we talk as well about sufficiency, we need to make it somehow sexy, because if you don't own something, if our neighbor can't be jealous because I buy a new Porsche car, well, what do I do? I need something else to find my luck in life. Concerning possible projects, there's a wonderful company in Uganda that is called WRF23, and WRF23 they use old motorbikes, remove the thermal motor, and they replace it by electric motors. And I think that could be, for example, an example where they reuse something. And if that then is done, for example, in rural Africa, not everybody needs every day big mileage and transport, but if the community can own it, if a local cooperative can own it, that would be probably as well something that could work.
Yes, thank you very much. That's something to explore. I'll speak to you afterwards.
Thank you. I would like to go on to the next speaker, so we don't run short of time. Thank you. could add the comment that if you look at gold and silver, such a system is already in place. Then a lot of questions comes with them, but then we'll take that later. Please.
Yes, hello, good afternoon. As presented before, my name is Päivi Petänen, and I'm a research scientist in sustainable business in VTT Technical Research Center of Finland. And the title of my presentation today is Linear versus Circular Differentiation Factors in Customer Value Propositions of Reusable Packaging. And this work is contributed by my colleagues from VTT and the University of Vaasa in Finland. So circular reusable packaging solutions have emerged to tackle the environmental sustainability problems of linear single-use packaging. And this is because reuse can result in increased usage level and longer life cycle for materials and resources. However, currently single-use packaging is dominant in the market, and consumers need to be motivated to choose reusable packaging options instead of the single-use options that they are very used to using. So this leads to the fact that companies need to differentiate the reusable packaging options through their strategic marketing actions, and our study explored how this is done. And here are our research questions. What kind of contrasts between linear and circular models do companies highlight in marketing in the context of reusable packaging? And how can these differentiation factors be managed? And we used the customer value propositions as a theoretical framework for our study. And customer value propositions are strategic marketing tools that articulate superior customer value in the company can offer to differentiate in the market in comparison to competing alternatives. So in this case, the competing alternative is the single-use packaging. And we explored customer value propositions through 4 dimensions. So economic, that are the factors that focus on the price of the offering. Functional, the factors that focus on the solution of the offering. Emotional, factors that focus on the experience. And symbolic, the factors that focus on the meaning of the offering. And we conducted a qualitative multiple case study, and we investigated 5 reusable packaging cases in the fast-moving consumer goods context in Finland. And we included multiple actors in the reusable packaging value chain in the study. So we included fast-moving consumer goods brands, restaurants, retails, public sector and reuse operators and packaging materials providers. And altogether 14 companies were included in this study in Finland. And we conducted 13 company interviews and 15 company workshops. And this study was done in a research project called Forever Pack. And it focuses on developing and examining reusable packaging options in Finland. And here are the use cases: reusable e-grocery packaging, reusable detergent packaging, reusable food packaging for hospitals, reusable takeaway food packaging, and reusable pizza box. And here is a summary of our results. So first, the economic level. The differentiation factor that the companies use regarding reusable packaging is cost distribution or allocation across multiple use cycles, in contrast to costs allocated in a single-use cycle in single-use packaging. And the companies aim to manage these differentiation factors by validating the economic customer incentives by employing deposit systems for the packaging or discounts. And in the functional level, the companies highlighted the participative customer role in the reuse process. This was compared to the more passive customer role in the single-use packaging. And companies aim to manage this differentiation factor by enhancing system convenience for the consumers by enabling take-back logistics for the reusable packaging. And in the emotional level, the companies highlighted enhanced sustainable consumption practices for the consumers. And this was compared to the non-sustainable consumption practices of single-use packaging. The companies aim to manage this differentiation factor by validating the sustainability impacts, the positive sustainability impacts of reusable packaging by including tracking systems to the reusable packaging and using data to validate these sustainability impacts. And in the symbolic level, the companies highlighted the emerging sustainable consumption communities so that the consumers are part of a group of people that consume in a sustainable way when they are using the reusable packaging. And this was compared to the conventional consumption practices or the mainstream practices of most of the consumers that are using single-use packaging. And the companies aim to manage this differentiation factor by enhancing consumer status and self-image facets by communicating the novelty and sustainability orientation of the reusable packaging orientation. Thank you.
We get them better and better time records. Congratulations. Do we have questions?
Yeah, what did you find out eventually being the biggest challenges for companies?
The biggest challenge is the transformation from the linear solutions to the circular solutions. So the single-use packaging is something that we are all used to using in a fast-moving consumer goods market. For example, when we buy pizza, we get it in a pizza box, cardboard box, and then we are not used to storing something in our home, the pizza box, and then returning it to the store and so on. So that's the biggest challenge for it. Yeah.
Can I just add one more question to that? Now you're talking about the consumer, the end consumer challenge, but what about the companies? I mean, the companies, you're talking about strategies, different strategies, but how do the companies actually tackle these challenges? And where are the biggest issues there?
Yeah. For this study, we did it from the marketing perspective, so we put the consumers into focus. And here are some ways that the companies are aiming to tackle these problems. Yeah.
I had two questions. One was especially on the reuse part. The reuse packaging, especially when you mentioned hospitals and others, the infrastructure required for reuse would also be a cost to the company. And that's what leads to my another question, also similar to the cost, the challenges with the company. Was it largely being transferred as a cost to the customer? Or how are they looking at validating the pricing or the economic?
Yes, I would say it was transformed to the customer, the costs, because, when you buy, for example, the pizza box again, you would have to buy the box. They would have to pay a deposit. And that's something that we're not used to. We're used to getting it for free. And that was, yeah.
Thank you. 2 minutes. Stick to the program.
Yes, I have a question. This recycling of this closed packaging system is, I think, realizable in local things. A pizzeria or something is closed. But since COVID, a lot of online shopping is doing it. A lot of packaging is going very far away. So we have no contact more between the customer and the company. I mean, it's probably much more difficult in this system. Or do you have also a solution for such system?
Well, we didn't have that kind of cases in this study, unfortunately. That would be very interesting. In this study, we focused on very regional packaging solutions. Yes.
Thank you very much. We now come to the last presentation. You will both come up. It's Rashna Arora and Vivek Mohandras. And he will present the theme of from resource efficiency to resource sufficiency. Please.
Thanks. Thanks again for this opportunity, and also to the previous speaker for setting a context on reusable packaging, because that's something that we are also going to discuss over here. So basically, when we look into a resource sufficiency, we have to understand that sufficiency is an approach that we can lead from an efficiency approach. So as we all know, this fundamental pyramid of management of resources, the thing that we are currently focusing when we specifically look into resources is recycling, because it's more easy, it's more convenient. So all the major companies are focusing on that. But to understand and approach a resource sufficiency approach, we have to have a reduction and a reuse model promoted. And of course, that's something that we are going to discuss in the upcoming slides. And this infographic source was taken from a research paper. And specifically, when we look into plastic packaging, that's something that we are going to discuss over here. So as you can see, a multi-material packaging, it has multiple layers, and this is a resource-intensive thing. There is a material as well as energy involved in this. And also the lifetime of this product is very short. So are we really trying to approach resource sufficiency by recycling or maybe incineration or landfilling? No. So that's where the idea of promoting reuse models is something that we are going to discuss over here. And why this upstream circular economy? This upstream circular economy is something that is a solution to the plastic economy that we have currently in the focus. So this is a research from 2020, which shows that 30% of the solution, it comes from a reduction of plastic packaging. Now, I'll just mention about our project. Our project is actually an Indo-German technical cooperation project on reduction of marine litter. And we are looking at solutions both upstream and downstream on reduction of plastic packaging. And this sufficiency, as explained by Sandberg, is where an absolute reduction is obtained by reducing the amount of consumption. There is a model shift. There's a consumption pattern change, extending the lifetime of products, and also sharing of practices amongst individuals. So when we think about resource efficiency and resource sufficiency, innovations play a key role. But innovation, when we think about, for example, you can actually promote new packaging materials. You are actually extending the product, but you have having new products there. And when it comes about resource sufficiency, you are thinking about alternate models of consumption. That's where the reuse refill model comes into play. And I will hand it over to Dr. Rachna Arora to explain more about the model that we are currently implementing in India.
Thank you. Thanks, Vivek. And yeah, so when we actually talk about the implementation on the ground, we are actually referring to a country, India, which is one of the highest populous, the most populous country in the world. And of course, the refill revolution and is something which has also internationally taken a space, at least in UNIA. We have seen that push coming globally. 170 countries agreeing to a legally binding, or India still putting up a voluntary binding instrument. So refill reuse has actually picked up that global dimension. Now coming to India, since we are implementing this bilateral project with the Indian ministry and it's funded by the German ministry BMUV, we actually just realized that working on marine litter, when you talk of coastal areas, you really just can't talk about only the waste which is at the end of its life. So you really need to work inland, you really need to work in coastal areas with the communities or even to the wider communities in general. So that's why at least the global legal, this discussion around reuse refill picked up the momentum. And in India we have a EPR, the extended producer responsibility notification that actually came in India, which also not just talks about EPR, national registry, the directive, but it also pushes the industry to actually have reuse and refill as a target, which is coming from 2025. So the implementation that we do currently is also paving experiences, generating a lot of validation of these innovators or innovation, that it is possible, it can get implemented. And even if our country is with wide disparity of affluence, people paying, someone still looking at buying even a 1 cent packaging material, which is a sachet. We still have an economy which is sachet dependent. So sachets will never get recycled, whatever it is, because we don't have a collection infrastructure. So that's something that will anyways go leaked into the ecosystem. So refillable is something which we are even trying from an affluent society, as I said, in 3 or 4 of our cities, but also moving to coastal communities across, where we are influencing them to change a sachet packaging or changing their HDPE bottle. So as I think was mentioned even in the inaugural today, that you actually look at sufficiency, you buy a detergent, you buy a floor cleaner, you buy the consumables, but don't pay for the packaging. Only pay for the material coming at your doorstep. So we still have a solution that's coming door to door. This truck is actually something which dispenses these liquids, and it is a digital solution because people can reach out to them digitally, get connected, and we have good subscription rates is what is happening. And it also kind of looks at this, to this entire approach of it also looks at promoting this entire, the connect between climate mitigation, the GHG reduction on plastic packaging directly. Like the number is pretty small if we just look at 500 kgs or half a ton that we actually talk about CO2 reduce, but this is just from last 6 months. We only talk about 1,500 to 1,800 households in India in the 3 cities who are actually subscribing to this. So the direct intervention is on reduce. You don't even pay for the packaging. We are looking at both solutions, B2B segments, the larger commercial establishments, and also the B2C segment. The B2C segment is a difficult area where you really talk about nudging consumers, looking at the interventions where behavioral changes could actually take up. And of course, to those community, you will not immediately talk about the climate benefits or reducing packaging. To them, you will actually nudge by interventions around the cost, the pricing, the economics, I think that you presented about, that those are the interventions that we are actually talking to different audience. Yeah. Just the last slide. So yeah, in India, we actually have this sustainable lifestyles for environment. That's the move that our Prime Minister has actually pushed for. It's in the G20. It's also in the Indian G20 presidency that we have currently, which India is leading. We actually look at the traditional values which India had, and we are just looking at reviving them continuously by these innovations, which is happening in one corner of a city, moving it to a national mainstream agenda where the government accepts these models. We have 3 state governments who are actually looking at technology solutions, promoting the lifestyles for sustainable environment, and also looking at not just putting a ban, not just enforcing EPR, but also providing solutions to the industry, to the consumers, to the citizens, to make a move, to make the reduction part much more obvious and simple. Yeah. So I think this is what we had. And thanks for your attention.
We have one question there at the back.
Thank you, Vivek and Archana, for your presentation. So as someone hailing also from India, I'm used to seeing refillable or refill packs, as we know it. And it was quite rare to see in the Western world as I moved here. So how do you believe that your approach will change, bring a psychological change in people who are already aware of refill packs?
Okay, so I'll take it and maybe Vivek, you can add. So basically refilling that we have in India is very much used for milk dispensing. We have a government scheme that runs on milk dispensing, but I would say for these kind of consumables, it wasn't there. And especially food delivery is very, very difficult because you have to really go into safety standards and all of that. So this element was quite, I would say only if it's 1,500, 1,800 households subscribing is a momentum that's gaining. Plus also, again, a global push around reuse and refill. The government is mandating reuse. So the companies, and in India, we have a voluntary, like the UK Plastic Pact. We also have an India Plastic Pact. So we're trying to work with all the HUL, like the Unilever and Nestle, like other these global companies also, to actually shift their models. And those interventions are already there, where we say B2B segment can actually take it up, where you don't have to invest too much on building the trust. So if I get the same product either by a refillable truck or by buying every time a new detergent, I would still be more accepting that change if I buy something which is a branded product rather than just buying something which is from a refillable truck. So this is also happening, I would say, voluntary with the industry. So it's kind of, again, an experiment, and we just spent 1 year implementing it. So yeah, I think it's going to take shape as it progresses.
Thank you. A follow-up question, if I may.
Okay.
Are you partnering, or are you envisioning partnering with FMCGs like P&G or Unilever?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Thank
that's
you.
what we are trying to do through CII, the Confederation of Indian Industries, as well.
Thank you so much.
We have one question there.
Thank you so much, Karin Sigwart from IUCN. I would have a question regarding the dialogue that you have with the community or with the municipalities where you are conducting the pilots. What was the main argument that you can convince communities to participate and to have this kind of shift? I saw that you mentioned the CO2 aspects or the climate aspects, but I think in our work from IUCN, when we argue with nature and nature conservation and people depending on nature and ecosystems, then the shift is, or the narrative is easier to understand. How did you structure the dialogue with the community?
I would refer to a very old report, which was with National Geographic, where the Indian consumers were actually rated 60% conscious on environmental decisions. This is an old report. We haven't seen the green index so frequent, but at least so the element, the traditional thinking is around conservation, sustainability, that's there. So our intervention was not to directly introduce the startup as refillables. We tried to convince first the government, both the national as well as the state government, and of course the municipal government, where Vivek has been working quite extensively. So we tried to convince them that only banning single-use plastic will not be effective. You need a solution, and this is one solution that we have. We of course work in a lot of other elements, but this is something, it required that narrative to come from the government. They have initiated it, now it's their model. It's no longer just one startup trying to do something. So it's now the government, kind of a model.
I'll just add quickly onto that. Working in the municipalities, they do have a big challenge of managing waste, of course. So when such a model which reduces the plastic at source is promoted, they're happy to invest in such models, and they take the ownership as well. And working in the states where we are there, and we have seen that the ownership is there, and they are actively promoting this through their social media also, and also actively endorsing it. The officials themselves, the bureaucrats themselves, politicians themselves, they endorse this kind of models. So it's seen a good model in the country. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? There we go.
I was not sure if I understood if you had considered all kinds of packages, also for food or only non-food.
Yeah, we had a very long debate in one of our states where they actually asked us to do it only for milk vending. And we found it very difficult. We said already there is an existing model in India which is on milk dispensing. We would like to, because, and that's what a question I also had, because the reuse infrastructure, refilling, you every time require an infrastructure to clean it more and more. No? So food grade, even though I think, as I said, the government is now taking it, they want to disperse the food grains, oil, no? But the choices are very specific. Every consumer would have a specific rice that they want, and they would like, it could be just a range. So it's a bit difficult to go immediately into that, but I think our state government is actually, some of them are actually looking for some specific, like the public food distribution of grains or something that they want to do it with this. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. So the official time for this session is over. So from now on, we're here on completely voluntary basis. Any further questions? Then I would like to close the session. Thank you for coming.